Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. Hope you're happy, healthy and well. It is time for a new book review today. I have the pleasure to share this review of this wonderful book by Joseph Heller. It's called Catch-22 and no doubt you would have heard of this book or may even have read it. So Joseph Heller is a well-known author. He was a prolific author actually, which I was surprised to find out about. He'd written this book in 1961. It was certainly published back then. I bought my book in the early 90s and you could see all the post-it notes and bookmarks simply because there's a lot of quotable quotes in here and a lot of things to think about, life and bureaucracy and hierarchy and unfairness that happens during times of strife and times of war. This book has a very interesting story of how it came into my hand. Many years ago in the early 90s, I myself was in the military. I was in the Navy, and at the time I had taken my first leave and I was going to go overseas. In fact, I was going to leave the next day to go and travel overseas to Greece, which I was really looking forward to. But back then I was poor. I lived from payday to payday and I didn't have enough spending money, but I figured, you know, something will work out in the end. It always does. I could borrow some money if I need to. I could use a credit card. That's what happens when you're young. You think a little bit more freely without any fear. So I saw this book on the bookshelf of a newsagent's, of all things, and I thought to myself, I really want to buy that book. That book sounds very interesting. And so I ummed and ahed. It was my catch-22 situation. If I spend money now on this book, I wouldn't have the money towards a holiday. And yet, if I went on my holiday, I wouldn't have a book to read. And so what had happened was I ended up buying this book. And I thought, oh, stuff it. You know, it'll work out in the end. I bought the book, and when I went up to the counter, the guy at the counter gave me a little lotto. There's a special competition. And I had to scratch the little card and I won $500 and it was $500 cash. And so the guy gave me $500 cash and I walked out with the book and $500 cash. So what a wonderful catch-22 situation. But did I ever read the book? No, it went back on my shelf and I spent the money and had a great time in Greece. Came back and had forgotten this book for over 30 years. Until now, I opened it up and I thought to myself, right, it's time to read Catch-22. And I sincerely believe that, you know, books come into our lives and are meant to be read at certain times of our life. And I know for a fact that if I was to read this book as a 22-year-old young woman who was in the military herself, I would not have understood this. I was too early into my journey of a new work. I was too early to be cynical. I was too early to actually experience the world and its harshness. And the characters in this book, although over the years when I was in the Navy, I certainly came across some characters like who were in this book. But back then it was just too early. So I would have opened this book up and I would probably have left it because I just simply didn't get it. Now at 50, okay, I'm in my 50s plus, Catch-22 is a completely different beast. It is something that I read and instantly I started then to really align and connect with the characters in here, especially Captain Yossarian. The whole idea here is it's about an Air Force base. They are posted at this place called Pianosa, a small Italian island off the coast of Italy. Now this is all fictional, of course. And what they do is they do bombing runs, and they're in a kind of like a little microcosm of their own. And they've got some weird ass colonels and generals who are more interested in making themselves look good to their superiors, more interested in the bombing patterns of taking good aerial photographs as opposed to fighting the enemy. And Yossarian actually thinks that he's going to be killed by his own people from their own incompetence, from their own idiocy.
It doesn't make a difference who wins the war to someone who's dead.
In how they're I guess, dealing with matters. So he has absolutely no trust in his superiors. He knows his peers around him are all nuts. They're all crazy. And we can see this in the chapters themselves and how it is written by the constant circular arguments. So someone might say something and then they might repeat it, and then the other person might repeat that and then say that it's incorrect, and then or it's correct, and then say it again. So there's constant circular arguments in this book. This then serves us to confuse us, but the way it's also written, the timeline is not straight. It doesn't go from, start to finish. In actual fact, each chapter is about each of the characters, but each of those characters and their chapters could be in the past, or it could be present, or it could be future. Only through the events of what's happening in this chapter do you then begin to understand the timeline. And an example is that their generals are utterly mad. They don't want people going on leave, so what they do is they up their bombing raids. They up the missions.
From 25 to 30. We're gonna win this thing.
From 40 missions, before someone can go on leave, they'll up it to 50. Once that person reaches 50, they'll push it up to 80 and so forth. So you don't really know what part of the storyline you're at, because in one chapter they're talking about 80 missions, in another chapter they're talking about 50 missions. That's how you kind of put the timeline together. I think Joseph Heller, what he did here was he deliberately made us confused. He deliberately put us into that situation where nothing makes sense. And least of all the people around you. At a time where you think you are in war, you are in a difficult situation, you are in strife, that you are in situations where you could be killed any instant, that you would believe that your peers, that your superiors would have your best interests to make sure that you stay alive. But they don't. Through their hierarchical, bureaucratical nature, and also looking good, really creates havoc and creates more danger in the base itself. But what is really interesting for me as I was reading this book, it was explained as a very comical book, and how I heard that some people laugh through it. Yes, you can laugh through it, but it wasn't a laugh as in a very ha ha ha, this is so hilarious, this is funny. It was traumatizing. You could actually see that the men, and they were mainly men, were all traumatized in their own different ways. And what they were doing was they were doing the things that would keep them alive, or keep their own spirit alive, or to kind of make sense in that craziness. So Yossarian was crystal clear. He was crystal clear, and yet he was trying to somehow make out that he too was mad. He was trying to get home, but they had this rule of the Catch-22 that you can't be considered mad if you ask your superiors that you want to go home, because by the mere fact that you're asking to go home, then you are not insane. So therefore you go back into battle and you go back into the mission run.
That's some catch, that Catch-22. It's the best there is.
The other thing for me was really interesting because it aligned to, I guess, my own experiences, not only in the military, but a big chunk of that time of my time in the corporate world, which was just as insane, just as mad. The bureaucracy and the hierarchy of people more interested in getting ahead for themselves, or how they look in front of their superiors, or doing things on the sly. We used to call, when I was in the military, grey men were the people that kind of did everything that they were supposed to do at the front, but somehow there was something, you never really understood them, you never really got to know them. They were, I guess, surface level. They did what they had to do to stay out of trouble, and yet they were probably doing something behind the scenes, something illegal, something not right, something unseen, something not people weren't aware about, that was serving their own interests. And that's what we see in this situation here in one of the characters, who basically creates an entire business enterprise where all the colonels and the generals are all part of the action and all want part of that business enterprise.
War is not about profits, son.
Absolutely, sir, not only.
So for me, reading this book in my 50s was completely different to if I had picked up this book in my early 20s. In my 50s now, I've been through all that cynicism. I've been through the hierarchy and the sheer idiocy of working in bureaucratical environments with utterly inane and stupid rules that only serve to frustrate colleagues, to frustrate people, and actually not understand nor even connect with their superiors and other colleagues. The ones who speak out, the ones who are crystal clear and can see the shit for what is happening and can see the bullshit detectives. If they speak up, they are on the outer. They are not only on the outer with their peers, who basically just say to them, you know what, just kind of make do as if you get this, or they're on the outer by their superiors who give them shit all the time, either bad work projects or gaslight them. Reading Catch-22 for me was very, very interesting, because the more I read about it, the more I thought, oh my God, this is my corporate life. There were some elements of circular arguments, bureaucratical processes that I endured or experienced in the military. And at the time, when I think back to them, I would laugh. I now laugh at the stupidity. But at the time, I thought, I don't understand what's going on. Why are we going into circular arguments? And this was how this book was about. As I was reading this, I was actually rethinking of both my military and my corporate life and all the crazy arguments that I'd been involved in. And I do remember one. So many years ago when I was in the Navy, we had parades, very much like what they did here. And during the parades, it meant that you had to be dressed appropriately with the right kit or the right uniform. And I remember going into the clothing store, and I think I needed a belt. And I went to the clothing store and asked for a new belt. I wanted it nice and shiny and new. And the sailor there at the clothing store went into the back area, came back, and then said, sorry, we can't give you the belt because we have the last one in stock. And I just looked at him and I said, yeah, and last one in stock, so can I have it? And he goes, no, you can't have it because it's the last one in stock. I go, if it's the last one in stock, then I can have it. It's the last one, so order some more. And he goes, no, we don't allow to do that, because one has always got to be sitting on the shelves, because we can't put a zero into our little supply system, computer system, because it creates havoc, it creates problems for the system. And I just stared at him and I thought, is he for real? Like, there is a belt sitting, the last belt, and I can't have it, and we're appeasing a computer system. These were the typical things, and we went round in circles, and it was constant like, I need that belt. Yeah, but you can't have it. It's the last one in stock. Well, I want the last one in stock. Well, we can't give it to you because we cannot show that we have none in stock. In the end, I finally got that belt by speaking to the supply officer and asked him why I can't have the last belt and why they can't order any more. And it was given under like, oh, here you go. You know, you're such a problem. Yeah, that's just one example. And I know that in the corporate and business world, there would be a whole heap more. For me, the life lessons here was the fact that is a book that should be read for our times. It is crazy what is happening. And even more so, especially now when work is experiencing so much change, and even though there might not be too much hierarchy or bureaucracy in a lot of work, we're seeing different situations and different inane situations play out in work. But this one really is something that kind of brings it to the fore and makes you think of all the stupid situations that you've been in your life as well, and how unfair it is to the people who voice these stupidities and voice the craziness and voice the things that don't make sense. For me, I really thought that I really connected with the Yossarian character. I mean, I think we should all be Yossarian in our work lives, but unfortunately I also think that work itself, the way work is nowadays, that sometimes it's just much easier to be or to look or to seem crazy in order to kind of survive. Don't play out the craziness, don't say it out loud, don't make waves, because you're never ever going to win. You're not going to win. The book was interesting in that sense. Look, there's another part of this book where I must share that the female characters all in this book, unfortunately, were all kind of written in very derogative ways. And there's a situation that happens here in this book in close to the end, which is actually horrific, and it happens to a female character. I must admit I didn't agree with it. All the females in here were considered as whores, prostitutes, only there for keeping the men entertained and for increasing morale. Females in this book, unfortunately, were not written in a very good light. That is my review and life lessons of Catch-22. Now, if you want to actually find out what happens blow by blow in each of the chapters, then I would encourage you to check other YouTubers or other articles and resources online, of which there are many. This whole channel is really all about the life lessons learnt through the books that I read, and I put it into context of my own life, my own thinking, my own experiences, my own reflections, and what I've been through and what I can connect or not connect with in the book. Catch-22 for me, I've connected with it, not only with my military experiences, but more so of my corporate and business life, where bureaucracy and hierarchy reign supreme. I guess the nonsensical nature of work, which we see relevant nowadays, even though was talked about from a military sense, you can actually also compare it quite similarly as being also of a business sense. And it was things that I had gone through myself. Now just reading it through Catch-22 makes you realize how crazy things are, and whether the choice is that you are the Yossarian, knowing that if you become like Captain Yossarian and you call out the bullshit for what it is, that you will get stomped on in the work situation, or whether you are like the other characters who could see the shit for what it was, but then somehow did their own thing, whether they were a grey man like Minda Bender.
No difference between you, me, happy, 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 dead. You, worry, 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 dead.
Or whether they are really crazy, or whether they are people pretending to be crazy.
You see the difference?
And doing their own thing. That is totally up to you. These are the choices that a lot of people face in work nowadays. Okay, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.